What up, what up, what up? It's your guy, Sam Factor here from WalterPicks. I'm here today to share with you what I've learned from doing over $1,000 worth of fantasy football drafts already. A quick call out here. These are best ball drafts over on Underdog Fantasy, the best place to do best ball drafts leading up to the season. It's a slightly different format than season long, so I want to call that out at the front of this. How best ball works, a quick overview. Your best lineups automatically submitted for you at the end of each week. There is no starting or sitting decisions each week, no trading, no adding, no dropping. All you do is the draft. It's an 18-round draft. You start 3 receivers, 1 flex, two running backs, 1 tight end, 1 quarterback. It's a half PPR scoring format. It's a slightly different game than season long. So some of the takeaways here might not directly translate to season long, but I think a lot of these high-level takeaways are going to translate to season-long fantasy. So I'm pumped to share with you what I've learned. I've done over 100 drafts. Most of the drafts are the $25 entry Best Ball Mania contest over on Underdog that has a $3 million first place prize. I've been grinding, guys. I'm pumped to share this with you. Let's dive right into it. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss more content like this. All right, my first takeaway from doing over $1,000 worth of fantasy drafts is that wide receivers are going insanely early this year compared to previous years. Take a look at this draft board from just a few days ago. In this draft, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 wide receivers taken in the first 28 picks. Sorry, the first 24 picks. 14 wide receivers taken in the first 24 picks. And in the first round, there was only 4 non-wide receivers taken in the first round. This one feels the least likely to translate to season-long fantasy. I think as we get closer to those traditional redraft leagues, we're going to see the running backs get pushed further up the board. But man, are wide receivers going earlier this year. And you should adapt accordingly if this sticks. Don't be afraid to take a wide receiver in the first round this year if you're going to be able to get running backs like Breece Hall, like Josh Jacobs, like Ramondre Stevenson in the third round, like you can right now. Another takeaway here is the consensus early picks are starting to form a little bit. The general consensus right now in these early drafts is Justin Jefferson's going first overall and Jamar Chase is going second overall. I do think people will mold around the consensus of Justin Jefferson first overall. I think there'll be a greater debate at number 2 and beyond. But generally speaking, the first 6 picks in almost all drafts have gone the way this draft has gone. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, and Travis Kelce is going in that top 6. I've also seen Austin Eckler go in the top 6. He went pretty late in this draft, what I'm showing right now. But this is generally how the first 6 picks of drafts are going. Again, this is a half PPR league, but I believe it's going to be pretty similar in PPR formats. Here's another draft to look at. Follows those early picks a little bit closer to what I was explaining. Kelce went a little bit later in this draft, but McCaffrey actually went number 1 overall. Haven't seen that very often. Jefferson 2, Chase 3, Hill, Kupp. A.J. Brown's been going in the top 8. Stephon Diggs is in that next tier as well, as is Austin Eckler and Travis Kelce. I think these are generally going to be the first 8 or 9 picks you see. The order might shift around a little bit in fantasy football drafts. Another thing I'm learning from these drafts is that Bijan Robinson is going as a top 5 running back in almost every single draft. He's going in the back end of the first round or the very beginning of the second round. I think this does make a lot of sense. The Falcons were one of the most efficient rushing offenses in the NFL last year with Tyler Algier and Cordarrelle Patterson. They're bringing back an even better offensive line than last season. They took Bijan Robinson with a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Historically, he compares to guys like Saquon Barkley and Ezekiel Elliott, who are mega producers, extremely athletic, size-adjusted athletes going in the top 10 picks of the NFL draft. Those guys produced extremely well early in their fantasy football careers and NFL careers. Bijan's expected to do the same thing. A lot of people think these rookie running backs are risky because we haven't seen them in the NFL yet, but in reality, they're actually less risky than a lot of the running backs taken in these first 2 rounds. They have less mileage on themselves because they haven't played in the NFL yet, and you don't spend a top 10 pick on a running back in the NFL to not give them a significant workload in the first year. Plus, we know Bijan Robinson is an extremely efficient pass catcher out of the backfield. He's going to get 50-plus catches this season, should easily cross 1,000 rushing yards, and he's got massive touchdown upside behind this great offensive line. So it makes sense. Bijan going to be a top 5 running back in almost all fantasy drafts this year. Don't draft scared. It's fine to take Bijan in the back end of the first, early second round this season. Another takeaway for me in these early drafts is that the elite quarterbacks are going earlier than ever before. I don't think I've seen quarterbacks taken this early across the board since the Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Tom Brady peak era. And that was back in the 2010s. So it's been almost over a decade, I think, since we've seen this many quarterbacks being picked in the fourth round or earlier. But it's because we have so many elite options at the QB position. I think generally speaking, the optimal strategy this year is to get the back end of these top tier quarterbacks. Guys like Justin Fields, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, that you're going to get behind these elite QBs that you're paying really premium prices for. Remember, fantasy football is a game of opportunity cost and value. If you can get Justin Fields, who has a chance to finish as the number one overall QB this season, really just him and Lamar Jackson and maybe Anthony Richardson have a shot at 1,000 rushing yards this year. I'm pumped. In this draft, you can see I got Justin Fields in the fourth round after guys like Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts. I think this is going to be one of my favorite fantasy football strategies this season, is targeting this end of the tier one QBs late in the mid-early rounds of drafts to keep up with some of these really elite QB teams that I'm going to have to play against throughout the season. I don't think this differs that much from my strategy last year, which worked out really well. I think generally speaking, don't reach on quarterbacks, but target the back end of the top tier. No matter where they end up sliding in your drafts, every draft's going to be a little bit different. You want this back end of the top tier QBs, unless some of these top QBs really slide further than expected. But generally, you don't want to be the first guy in your draft to take a QB when you can wait 3 rounds later and get a quarterback that also has a chance to finish as the number one overall quarterback in fantasy football this season. And if I miss out on all of the tier one QBs this season, for me, those guys end at Trevor Lawrence. I'm going to wait all the way till the end of my draft, and I'm going to get Anthony Richardson. Here he's going in round 8, but I think in season-long leagues, you're going to be getting Anthony Richardson close to the very end of your draft this year. Another call out from this draft board, when we look at the tight end position, Darren Waller is the end of a top-tier tight end. I would put 3 tiers into these early tight ends. Travis Kelce's in his tier of his own. Then we got TJ Hawkinson and Mark Andrews in their own tier. And then the third tier of tight ends is Kyle Pitts, Dallas Goedert, and Darren Waller. Darren Waller is the end of that tier. I think there's a absolutely massive drop-off from Darren Waller, who has a legit chance to lead the Giants in targets and receiving this year, to Evan Ingram, David Njoku tier. They're not awful. They both could have reasonable roles in their offenses, but I don't think they're going to come anywhere close to this consistent week-to-week type of performance you're going to get from these top 7 tight ends that we previously mentioned. So I'm really targeting similar to the QBs. If you're not going to land one of these top tier tight ends, and I think Kelsey's fine to take in the first round. I think Andrews, Hawkinson, where you're seeing them go in this round, round 4, in this draft, round 4, I think that's fantastic. But I want one of these top tier tight ends, and that tier ends in Darren Waller. So I'm willing to reach a little bit for Goddard and Waller as we get towards the end of that tight end tier, because there is such little consistency at the tight end position. And if you miss out on this top tier, I would really wait significant amount of time till the end of the draft to draft a tight end. Some of my favorite late round tight ends, I actually think I might be covering them up on this draft board. Maybe not. I'm not seeing him right now, but I do really like Greg Dulcich, where he's going. He went in round 10. I also like Chigo Okonkwo. I don't think he might have gone in round 12 even in this draft. I like him late too. Dalton Schultz, not awful. But again, none of these guys are going to have the consistency of that top tier of tight ends. You can see in this draft, I took Alvin Kamara at pick 114. Another takeaway from these early drafts for me is that nobody knows what's going on with Alvin Kamara. He's right now getting drafted outside the top 100 picks in almost every single draft. It's extremely strange to see. And it, to me, is saying that the market is pricing in a nearly 6 to 8 game suspension for Alvin Kamara. We are not going to have much clarity on the Alvin Kamara suspension situation until likely early August, maybe even late August, as we approach just a week or 2 away from being at the start of the NFL season. But it is expected he gets suspended. There's also a chance, though, that he doesn't get suspended still, or that the legal proceedings go longer than expected, and the suspension doesn't come till next season, similar to what happened last NFL season with Alvin Kamara when these legal proceedings started. I'm drafting Alvin Kamara with caution, but late in drafts, if you're not taking Alvin Kamara as your starting running back, or even maybe your first backup running back, I do think there's some value to find there. He did dip in efficiency last season, but he's still an elite receiving back on a team with just Jamal Williams and Keandre Miller, a rookie running back that I believe was taken in the 3rd or 4th round by the Saints this year. Not super impressive talent behind Alvin Kamara. I do think Jamal Williams can carve out that goal line role, though, and Keandre Miller can mix in on all 3 downs. He's the more intriguing upside pick for me, Keandre Miller right now. Both guys will probably have some value in the situation where Alvin Kamara is suspended. But right now, I still like Alvin Kamara the most of all 3 guys, despite the suspension. Don't overweight the beginning of the fantasy football season too heavily. Remember, championships are won at the end of the fantasy football season. That is what matters the most. So I'm still willing to take some stabs at Alvin Kamara because the cost is really baked in with the risk right now, in my opinion. Here's another draft board. This one I had the 4th overall pick. I took Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, and Josh Jacobs with my first 3 picks, and I didn't take another running back in the next 8 or 9 rounds straight. You can see I'm right here at 4 overall. But my takeaway from this one that I want to share with all of you, I have 2 here. One is that people are drafting Michael Thomas as though he's already injured. He's going in the 9th round. I've seen him go in the 10th round. This is at pick 100 that I got Michael Thomas at. It's not that different than the Alvin Kamara situation with how late they're going, feeling really strange. We obviously seen elite production out of Michael Thomas in the past, but we haven't seen it for 3 years. He basically hasn't played more than a quarter of a season for the past 3 straight years. Meanwhile, he's only 30 years old. He's not past that age apex of 32 that you can start to get concerned about some of these wide receivers. And he is fully healthy right now. Michael Thomas at full health. This is the healthiest Michael Thomas has been heading into a training camp in the past 3 years. By all reports, he's going to be a 100% participant in training camp when it starts. There's also reports out there that he's starting to already build a really strong connection on and off the field with Derek Carr. I still think Chris Olave is going to lead this team in air yards, in targets, in receiving yards, and probably in touchdowns too. But Michael Thomas in round 9, I think is an absolute steal. You're not drafting him as a starting wide receiver in fantasy football, but he can absolutely become that for you if he can stay healthy. And again, right now, he is fully healthy. Don't draft scared. I'm picking Michael Thomas all day in round 9 and 10. I think people forget what Michael Thomas is. Even when he was playing last year, he had some great weeks, top 24 wide receiver fantasy point weeks. I'm in on Michael Thomas at this price. People are really, really done with Michael Thomas. I'm not done yet. Another takeaway from this draft and from all the drafts that I've done is people are really sleeping on the upside of Kadarius Tony. Kadarius Tony gets traded to the Chiefs last season, goes on to win the Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs. I believe he scored a touchdown in that Super Bowl as well. And he barely played last year, guys. Kadarius Tony had a 22.6% snap share last NFL season, but he was targeted on almost 30% of his routes. If he gets that snap share even to 50, 60%, we're looking at potentially a top 24 wide receiver in fantasy football. The Chiefs let Juju walk this offseason. All they did was add Rashee Rice and Richie James in free agency. Rashee Rice is a rookie. He's likely not going to play very much. So Kadarius Toney's competing with Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Sky Moore, Travis Kelce, obviously going to lead this team in receiving. But if Kadarius Toney can stay healthy, similar to Michael Thomas, and I would even say Toney staying healthy is probably even a less of a likelihood than Michael Thomas, but a healthy season from Kadarius Toney with just a little bit of a bump in snap share, we're looking at potentially top 10 wide receiver in fantasy football. That is within Kadarius Toney's range of outcomes with Patrick Mahomes. So I'm in on Kadarius Toney at this price, and I think people are really sleeping on the upside here. All these guys that he's getting drafted around, Jahan Dotson, George Pickens, Gabe Davis, even Quentin Johnson, all taken in the same round of this draft. No one has even close to that ceiling that Kadarius Toney has as the potential number 1 wide receiver on the Kansas City Chiefs. Another quick takeaway from these early drafts for me is that nobody knows who's going to lead the Texans in receiving. The Texans draft C.J. Stroud in the first round of this year's NFL draft. I do like C.J. Stroud. Rookie QBs are tough to bank on in fantasy football in general, but I think Stroud has more talent than he's getting credit for right now. Anyways, look at the guys being drafted for the Texans when it comes to the pass catchers. We got Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz, who are projected right now based on average draft position to lead this team in receiving. But we also see guys like John Mechie, Robert Woods, and Tank Nathaniel Dell going late in drafts. Nobody knows who's going to lead this team in receiving. My bet would be on Dalton Schultz, Nico Collins. But I think John Mechie, Robert Woods, and Tank Dell all have a shot here. I'm willing to take stabs late in drafts. I think this is going to be a situation in season-long fantasy to monitor really closely early in the season because almost all these guys are going to end up on the waiver wire either at the start of the season or at some point throughout the season. And there's going to be fantasy points coming from this Texans offense who's going to be playing from behind for most of the season. So a situation to monitor, but one major takeaway here is nobody knows who's going to lead the Texans in receiving. Another couple takeaways from these early drafts is that everybody is in on Jerry Jeudy this year. In this draft, he's going in the early 4th round. I snagged him in the early 4th. I went a 3 wide receiver build around Nick Chubb, a build I really like this year. But you got to take Jerry Jeudy in the early 4th or late 3rd round to get him. He's not going to slide much farther than that. I don't think I've seen him slide into the 5th round in a single draft this year. People are very much in on Jerry Jeudy, and they are very much out on Courtland Sutton, who's going in the 9th round. If you guys remember all the way back to last offseason, the Courtland Sutton versus Jerry Jeudy debate was a very hot debate in the fantasy football community. Courtland Sutton was actually going just slightly earlier than Jerry Jeudy almost all of last offseason. I was on team Jerry Jeudy last year at cost. This year, it's tough not to be on team Courtland Sutton, but I'm still very much in on Jeudy as well as the elite top alpha wide receiver in that Broncos offense. By all reports, Sean Payton absolutely loves Jerry Jeudy. We saw the connection with Russ last year, and I think he is one of the premier route runners in the NFL. I won't be shocked when he finishes a top 15 wide receiver in PPR leagues. Just know you're going to have to take him in the first 4 rounds, or he's going to be on another team. Another early takeaway from these drafts, though, is that people are really getting scared about Derrick Henry's age. You can see in this draft room, he went to the 2nd overall pick, but in the 3rd round, Derrick Henry hasn't gone past the first 2 rounds in, I think, the last 2 or 3 NFL seasons. Derrick Henry is already a sure fame Hall of Famer. I think he is in the argument, actually, is the best rusher the NFL has ever seen. He's one of the only running backs to have multiple consecutive rushing seasons where he averaged over 100 rushing yards per game. He did that in 3 straight seasons. Last year, he fell just short. I think he was right around 96 rushing yards. Yeah, right around 96 rushing yards per game. He was only behind Josh Jacobs when it came to rushing yards. But people are getting scared because he's going to hit that terrifying 30 years old threshold when it comes to the running back position that everyone gets scared about. People are scared about the mileage on Derrick Henry, who's seen some of the most volume in the NFL over the last 5 years. But meanwhile, it's all being priced in to his cost. He's going in the 3rd round. It's going to be a slightly different Titans offense this year. They're likely going to see some negative game scripts. Derrick Henry's not going to catch very many passes. But guys, Derrick Henry's probably still going to average over 20 rushing attempts per game. He really should be going in the first 2 rounds, especially in season-long formats where consistency is so important, a little bit less important in these best ball formats. I'm not as scared as most people about Derrick Henry right now. It's going to be Tyjae Spears, likely behind him, a rookie running back. That's pretty much it. Hassan Haskins, I think, is going to get cut because of a legal situation. There's nothing really behind Derrick Henry to threaten his workload. Even in a new offense, I am in on Derrick Henry in the 3rd round. And look at these builds you can make with these wide receivers going early and guys like Derrick Henry and Saquon sliding. Look at this guy, number 2 overall. He gets Chase, Saquon, and Derrick Henry. Those were all first-round picks in fantasy football last year. Absolutely insane. The last takeaway I want to share with you all today is that nobody is believing in the Patriots offense this year, specifically the passing offense. Ramondre Stevenson typically going in like the 3rd or 4th round. And then you don't see another Patriots player go until like round 13 or 14. Juju went in the 11th round in this draft. He's been falling like a stone, though, in the recent drafts I've been doing as late as round 13 and 14. Mike Gesicki's going in round 14 of this draft. I've been stacking the Patriots offense late significantly in these drafts, really frequently. In these drafts, I'm stacking the Patriots offense late. The Patriots, for this best ball format, I like particularly because of their playoff schedule. They play in the playoffs for this best ball tournament. And again, remember, the playoffs is really all that matters in fantasy. This is where the money is won. They play the Chiefs, then they play the Broncos, and then they play the Bills. They play 2 of the top 4 offenses in the NFL in those fantasy playoffs. I like that a lot. And guys, I'm getting Mac Jones, who's a starting quarterback in the NFL in this format that is pretty valuable. Obviously, he's got to hold on to the job over Bailey Zappi. I don't expect that to be a problem for him this year. He's going in the last round, 18th round of this draft. This isn't as big of a note for the season-long fantasy people, the redrafts. Mac Jones isn't going to get drafted. Hunter Henry's not going to get drafted. Mike Gesicki, probably not going to get drafted. Tyquan Thornton, none of these receivers are probably going to get drafted. But keep an eye on this offense, guys. This offense, especially the passing offense, it cannot get worse than last season where we didn't even have an offensive coordinator on the Patriots. That's going to be different this year with Bill O'Brien in town, who was the offensive coordinator for the Pats in some of their best offenses that they had. They never won a Super Bowl with Bill O'Brien. All of those came with Josh McDaniels. But they had some really elite 2 tight end systems. I think Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki are going to be really involved. I've been stacking both those guys together in this best ball format pretty consistently. But nobody believes in this Pats offense. They are true underdogs heading into this season. But I think we're going to see a leap forward from Mac Jones this year. And in general, I think people are sleeping on the potential for this offense because it cannot get worse than last season. One other takeaway I have from these drafts is that Brock Purdy and Kyler Murray right now are getting drafted with significant injury discounts. If you see this draft right to the left of me, you can see Brock Purdy. He got picked in the 12th round here. All reports are that he's trending to be very much ready for training camp and for week 1, and it has the starting job for him to lose. He's going to be the starting quarterback for 49ers offense with Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, and Brandon Ayuka, the bazooka. I don't think there's a quarterback with a better supporting cast. Maybe you could argue Geno Smith has it, but when you factor in Christian McCaffrey's receiving ability, I think Brock Purdy's got that in the bag as the best supported quarterback. Plus, we know that 49er system is just amazing for quarterbacks. Meanwhile, he's going in the 12th round, just ahead of guys like Matthew Stafford, behind guys like Russell Wilson, who are not in nearly as good of situations. And then Kyler Murray is another interesting one, a significant injury discount on Kyler right now. Again, remember, the back half of the fantasy football season is much more important than the front half. Kyler Murray right now, he's towards ACL, I believe it in MCL injury in there as well. He is apparently, by reports I've read recently, slightly ahead of his recovery timeline. Now, the Cardinals are projected to be the worst team in the NFL this year. They lost DeAndre Hopkins. They have a bottom 3 defense in the league. Their offensive line is suspect. So there's a lot of concerns for the Cardinals in general on top of the injury risk. But if Kyler Murray's back by week 5, which to me seems like likely more than 50% chance right now for Kyler Murray to be back by week 5, I think you're getting an absolute steal in round 15. We've seen Kyler Murray be a top 10 fantasy football quarterback. He can do it with his legs, which is an absolute cheat code when it comes to fantasy. You get 50% more points for rushing touchdowns in most leagues than passing touchdowns, and you get 150% more points for rushing yards than passing yards. That's why rushing in fantasy football is an absolute cheat code when it comes to the quarterback position. I'm in on Brock Purdy and Kyler Murray right now at their injury discounts. I'm willing to take an early risk on their injury recovery timelines. And that's one of the main takeaways I've had from these early drafts is if you're going to wait on QB, you can get some of these guys late. You can stack Brock Purdy, Kyler Murray, and then even maybe Mac Jones together and spend basically zero draft capital acquiring those 3 guys in drafts. There you have it, guys. Those are some of my takeaways from doing over $1,000 worth of fantasy football drafts already. The grind is going to keep going. Make sure you like and subscribe for more content like this. Let me know in the comments what you think and any takeaways you had from looking at those draft boards. And I will be back very soon. Guys, time is the most valuable thing we have. So thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Have a great one. Good luck, everybody.